Have you ever gone to a continuing education class and they use all the fancy terminology that makes you have to think harder? In today's episode, I explain why I use the language I do and the terms that I do when teaching and working with clients. Listen in to also hear the 5 main points of my treatment philosophy. Hello, friends. This is Lynn Schulte, and you are listening to the Birth Healing Summit podcast. We are here for meaningful conversations that will transform the way you work with pregnant and postpartum clients. Whether it is a new perspective, tool, or technique, you'll be able to implement it into your practice today. I invite you to sit back, listen with an open mind, and grab the golden nugget today's guest has to offer. Now let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode. And today I want to talk about my language and my philosophy. So I'll explain more about that. But before I dive into our topic today, I just wanted to let you know what we've been up to here at the Institute. We completed the first pregnancy cohort, online cohort. A group of practitioners went through the pregnancy course, and I just had my last follow-up 1 month after the course ended, follow-up call with them. And it was great to hear how they have been implementing this work and the results that they've been getting with their pregnant clients. So that was so fun for me. And we are just kicking off our second Treating the Postpartum Pelvis cohort. So I want to thank all of those therapists that have signed up for this second round of cohort. I'm excited for all of you to learn this information and get it into your hands. And then I just wanted to put a bug in your ear about knowing that we will be running our very first holistic treatment of the postpartum body cohort that will start at the end of September. So the doors will open up mid-September for you to join in on that cohort. So if you are interested in studying the postpartum body course and you've been thinking about purchasing it, the September's a great time to join in. You get extra group calls with me. It's a supported journey with weekly emails of the material that you should be covering each week. And there's a forum that you can ask questions in. I also created a WhatsApp group for my pregnant cohort, so people are able to WhatsApp me some questions. And yeah, it was a lot of fun for the pregnancy course. So I'm excited to offer it for the postpartum course. Now, if you've already purchased the postpartum course and you would like to join in on the cohort, you just need to email us at support@instituteforbirthhealing.com, and Danielle will add you to the cohort for you to get all the information about that. So there's no extra money that you need to pay. My intention for doing these cohorts and supporting you in learning this is to get you through the courses. I want you to be supported so that you complete the material, you complete the course. It saddens me that there's so many people that purchase my courses, but yet they've never started them, and that does nobody any good. So I'm hoping that you will be interested in joining this cohort. You will get a study buddy as you do the cohort, and that you will get through the material. And I'd love to support you with all the group calls that we're going to do. There's 4 group calls that will happen during the postpartum body cohort. So that's all the news I wanted to share. And I'd like to dive into Lynn's language and philosophy. That's the title of today's podcast episode. And this came to me because a couple of years ago at a CSM, I was talking to a prominent PT, and she said, "Lynn, you don't speak our language." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't." And I walked away from that interaction going, I don't even know the language that you speak. Like, it doesn't come natural to me. It's just not it like my brain clouds over when I start to think about all the terminology and the way the information, the way it's shared and the way it is in PT courses. So I sat with that and said, well, do I need to change the way I talk? And I really sat with it, and I've known from the get-go that I need to remain true to myself. And I intentionally use the language that I do for a reason. And that reason is that I do not want my students having to think too hard when they are learning with me. And I want to present information in the simplest way possible, especially when it comes to learning the techniques, because I want you out of your head and into your hands so that when you're doing the techniques, you're able to sense what's happening in your hands and you're not in your head trying to figure out what it is that you're supposed to do. So you'll notice if you've taken any of my courses, you'll notice that I do not use anterior, posterior, cephalad, caudad. I don't use those terminologies intentionally because I don't want you to have to like think, okay, wait, which way is anterior, which way is posterior, because it can be confusing if someone's on their back or on their stomach. And so I will use the words towards the ceiling, towards the floor, towards the head, towards the toes, and or towards the feet. And that is intentional so that you just like, oh, okay, I don't have to think too hard about that. I know exactly what she means by towards the floor. If someone's prone and I'm, a PA is different than a PA towards in supine. So that's why I intentionally leave out those bigger terminology, the bigger words. And I use simplistic terminology so that you don't have to think too hard as you're studying with me. So that's super, super intentional. The other thing that I do differently that I think is the reason this therapist said that is because I talk about when doing intravaginal work, I don't talk about the endopelvic fascia. I don't talk about the pubocervical fascia. I talk about the bladder. When you go to do internal work and you find the urethra and you follow that urethra back, yes, that is the pubocervical fascia, but the bladder is right underneath there. And you can learn to palpate the bladder. And that is kind of what I want you to be focusing in on. And the reason I started saying the bladder is because that's what came into my mind, into my intuition as I was working on a client one day. And that's what that intuition was as I was palpating the pelvic floor muscles and I was assessing them, getting a sense of where they're at. And I heard, check out the bladder. I didn't hear, check out the pubocervical fascia. I heard, check out the bladder. So I was like, huh, what does that mean? And so I went up, I found the urethra and I followed it back. And I'm like, okay, well, this mushy tissue must be the bladder. And I started noticing that it was different from one side to the other. And then I figured out how to make effective change in there. And then I went back to the pelvic floor muscles and I went, oh my gosh, the pelvic floor muscles are better. They're different. There's less tone to them. So I was blown away by that. And so I've always just called it the bladder. And I think about the other things that we do on the abdomen when we're addressing the liver. We don't talk about the abdominal fascia and everything else that we're touching in there. We're addressing the liver. When we address the stomach, we don't talk about the abdominal wall and everything else that we are addressing. We talk about the stomach. And so that was my approach and my reasoning for saying, hey, we're going to address the bladder. We're going to manipulate the bladder, mobilize it into midline. And it's amazing how much it affects the pelvic floor muscles. So that is my reasoning around doing what I do and how I teach, because I don't like getting into all the big heady information. When I'm doing my lectures, I give you the nitty gritty. I give you the anatomy. I give you the physiology of what's happening with the pelvic bones. And I don't get into all these other theories and concepts. I give you the anatomy, help you to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and then I teach you the techniques to do that. So that is my language. That's what I use, and I hope you get that, you understand this. I thought I would share this so that you guys understood where I was coming from. And the other thing I want to share really is my philosophy. And I cover this in the holistic treatment of the pregnant body and postpartum body courses. And I love this. My number one treatment rule, and when I used to teach live and lecture live, I would have the whole group say it out loud all together. And I'm sure for those of you that may be listening in that have been one of those, you know what I'm going to say. But my number one rule is respect the tissues. And it's so important that we do so. I think as a physical therapist, and I know my training was we are meant to impart into the body and we are meant to make effective change in the body. I know massage therapists want to get rid of those knots in the muscles and PTs, we want to release the tension in the tissue. Well, we can do that pretty aggressively. And what I've learned over the years, and this comes from doing it that way and not getting good results. In fact, actually having people come back worse and the pain being worse because I forced something to happen. And I have found that if I just respect the tissues and try to get curious with what I'm feeling underneath my hands, that curiosity can lead me to what the tissues are really wanting and needing instead of my force. So my number one treatment rule is to respect the tissues. And it's just a much, much better way to go to work with the body. My number two rule is never create pain. I am not a fan of no pain, no gain. I can understand that maybe from an orthopedic standpoint when we're trying to get range of motion back into a extremity or to a joint. However, the pelvic floor muscles do not need, the pelvis in general does not need any pain to get some gain. So I am a huge fan of if it's painful, I'm going to back off. If it's painful, I'm going to do something else first and then come back and see if that's better. But I am never, ever, especially intravaginally, never create pain intravaginally. There are some great options for you. If the introitus, the entry of the vaginal tissue is painful, Dee Hartman has on her YouTube channel 5 exercises you can have your client do prior to doing intravaginal work or prior to them having penetrative sex that they can do to help calm down the muscles, the tissue at the entrance. Breathing, pelvic tilts, bridging, maybe I think, I'm forgetting a couple of the others, but um, there is no reason that we should be increasing pain intravaginally when we're doing intravaginal work. That the vaginal opening is a person's safety and security. That if there is increased tension in those tissues, in those muscles, that body is trying to protect itself and it is trying to keep something out. And if you can learn to tune into those tissues, and that's why I teach when we first enter into that pelvic space that we just put our finger right at the entrance. And then you can see if you get drawn in energetically or if you get pushed out. And that is an excellent thing to listen for before inserting your finger in vaginally, because if you're getting pushed out and you go in, you're just traumatizing that body a little bit more. And there's more that we can do to help someone feel more safe, feel more secure. And just trying to tell them to relax is not the key. So I cover how to dive into deeper in that in my birth healing intensive program. So it's a 9-month program. You learn how to work with trauma in the tissues and how to all the different causes of tissue stuckness, energetic holding, increased tone that's not releasing with just some gentle pressure. There are reasons that that tissue is not releasing, and we dive into that in all those in that program. So I am not a fan of creating pain in any way especially when doing intravaginal work. The other thing I am very keen on not doing is chasing the pain. When you're working on the body, and you release an area, sometimes people is like, oh, my shoulder's starting to hurt, or oh, I feel it in my pinky, or oh, I'm feeling it in my ankle. Whatever you're doing, do not stop doing that. You do not want to chase the pain. The pain is the body is just sharing a connection with what you're currently doing, and that what you're currently doing is making an effective change in the body. So keep doing it. Don't go, oh, well, let me go check out your ankle. Let me go check out your shoulder. Just recognize the connection to what you're currently doing and keep at it. So know that don't chase the pain. The pain is never where the problem is. The problem is always usually on the opposite side where the pain is. And I've had several clients that go, oh my gosh, you worked everywhere but where the pain was, and now my pain's gone. Because I'm listening to the body and I'm learning how to, and I teach how to learn to listen to where the body draws you in, and where the tissues want support and some help. Then the other important thing is, another one of my treatment rules is, we should never, ever, ever force a release to happen. This goes back to rule number one, respecting the tissues. If we are forcing the tissues to release, the body does not like that. Usually the pain comes back worse. And yeah, I've just had that happen too many times when I was a younger PT, and I just want to save you guys from that. And there's a reason that the body is not wanting to let go. And you need to learn how to listen deeper into the tissues and listen to what the tissues are trying to say. This is accessing part of your intuition, learning to feel with your hands more than just for tone or tension, but trying to get into deeper of what's really being held in those tissues. Is there emotion being held in there? Is there trauma being in there? There's all different things that could be causing that tissue to remain tight. And yeah, it's important for us to learn how to respect the tissues and never force them to release. Because when you understand some of the concepts that I teach, a lot of times by the time you get to the tight muscle, when you do the other steps, there's nothing to release, especially when we're doing intravaginal work. When you learn how to work with the bones of the pelvis, you don't have to force as much. There's not as much pressure you have to put on the tissues. They release automatically by shortening those muscles there. And one of the other things, I know I had a wonderful conversation with Ramona Horton at one of my summits, and I asked her, because she is not a big fan of the word release. And I was asking her why that. And actually, I forget her answer to it, but I'm like, okay, release works for me, because that is exactly what I'm feeling in my hands when the tissues let go. That tension melts underneath my hands. It's like it's releasing. So I am a big fan of that word, and I use it a lot in my teachings. And then the other last treatment rule that I'd love to educate you all on is that you want to learn how to match the tissues. You only want to give as much force as you need in order to get a response in the tissue. And sometimes it can be extremely light. I had an Ralpher actually that blew my socks off with a session that she did, and she just barely had her finger on my skin. There was zero pressure. It was just an awareness, like her skin, her finger was just giving my body a sense of awareness. And she just touched my body extremely lightly. And I got off the table and my hip hurt so bad because it was in a completely different position. And I had to walk it out, and eventually it stopped hurting, and it like, oh, okay, now I know how to function. But I was blown away by how much change happen in my body by her just barely touching my body. And so I remember that every single day that I'm in the clinic, and that I have to back off. I know as a physical therapist, I'm very heavy-handed, and we need to lighten our touch. And so a lot of time I start very light, but yet sometimes the tissues draw me in, and I start, it's like they want more and more pressure. And I always, when I'm adding more pressure, I always ask my clients, I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? This seems like a lot of pressure. And they're like, oh my God, it feels so good. And so it's what the body wants. I'm just giving the body what it wants. So there's a skill to learning how to match the tissues. And I encourage you all, especially PTs, to back off, to try less force, try to soften your hands more. And because softer hands actually feel more. The more pressure, the more tension you have in your hands, the less you can feel. So you really want to have loose, soft hands, and you want to sink into the tissues, invite yourself into the tissue versus forcing yourself in. And that's respecting the body. And that allows the body to accept you coming in. And I never, ever, ever want my clients to kind of rebound or jolt when I'm working on them. If they do, I'm like, I am so sorry. I wasn't respectful enough there. So I hope that this helps in you understanding maybe a newer way to approach the body, or maybe this is just if you've taken one of my courses, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that piece. So I hope it's a good review for some of you, and maybe some of these newer concepts you can put into practice when you go back and you have your hands on someone. So keep this in mind. And I'd love, if you're interested, to have you join me in one of my courses. You can sign up and take this holistic treatment of the postpartum body cohort online in September. We start September 30th. This is the start of that cohort. And if you then choose to want to come to a live event, a live course next year, you can always upgrade to a live course. So if you are planning on attending a live course next year, I would encourage you to sign up for the cohort to get this extra support of doing it in a group. There is a group collective consciousness that happens when we do a cohort, and being a part of that can just add that much more to your learning. And so if you're planning on, like, oh, I just want to take a live course, getting through the online course is a requirement for the live course. So you may want to jump on board and be a part of this cohort and get through the material that way. And then you can always upgrade to a live course at any time. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And here is to smoother births and faster recoveries. Thanks so much. And we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care. Bye. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Institute for Birth Healing. To discover more, visit instituteforbirthhealing.com. To claim $50 off of any online course, use coupon code PODCAST50 at checkout. Till next time, I'm Lynn Schulte, founder of the Institute for Birth Healing.